And now I'm so excited to introduce my good friend and our Chief Sales Officer, Rick Baker, to help us understand more about Aero.
I'm a sales guy. A sales guy has to start with a car, right? It has to be there, and I wanted to show you this because life's about experiences. And I may not be from the millennial generation, but I am an experiential individual that loves to live on that cutting edge. And I had this opportunity to be in that car. That's me in that car. And what you'll notice is my brakes are on fire. That's never a good thing. But I was going from 202 miles an hour down to 50 to make turn 12 in Austin. I had this moment of opportunity to take out this car and to do these amazing things. And what I love about cars, and the reason I just showed you that video around Porsche, is because it's not so much the style, the look from the outside. I'm a gearhead. From my days in the Marine Corps rebuilding Jeeps or Hummers because I had broken them, to now rebuilding an Alfa Romeo Giulietta Spider when I was in high school, and now to these days where I like to tinker around with an engine. What's inside the cover? What really makes something beautiful? And Porsche had created for 50 years a style of vehicle that became synonymous with Porsche itself as the family tradition, the 911. And yet, in 2004 to 2010, sales began to flatten. It wasn't because it wasn't a great car. It's because innovation was outpacing them. It's because the market was rising up and the buyer had changed. So Porsche did what was natural of any good German automaker. They sat back and asked the question, how do we maintain the prestige of a 911 and take it into the future, and yet make it more adaptable, more affordable, more capable, and once again, market leading? And in 2014 to 2015, in every single market in the world, the 911 had double-digit growth. And the reason was a group of people in Stuttgart took the beauty of their legacy, flipped it on its heels, and said, without losing the beauty of history, let's redesign the future with something more efficient, more effective, and for you car and gearheads out there, 0 to 60 in 2.4. Now, for someone like me, that's just dang cool. But to do it with less gas than ever before, more fuel efficient, burning at a higher rate, using the technology of PDK, a double clutch, to create transferability and the smooth of acceleration that was required for a vehicle of this type. Now, why do I tell you these things? Because in sales, it's fast. Things are changing around us. You listen to the Challenger sale, you know without doubt that the buyer has changed. The market has changed. And so we're talking about Aero today, and the irony is, as everything around us looks optically better, what you have to look is under the hood. What's under that hood? Because there are a lot of cars that look good on the outside, but they hold zero value long term. Just because you can build it to go fast doesn't mean it will maintain its speed and value over the lifespan of its life. Porsche has maintained and accelerated, not just with the engine, but with their nomenclature, their design, and they continue to reinvent on a regular basis. And so I want to take you through a little bit of the journey of where SAVO's come. And to do that, I need to invite a dear friend, someone that I've gotten to know through this journey who was brought on board to kind of take us through not just an agile approach to a technology, but to help us reconsider how we might reinvent something that's been around, as we've been talking about, for more than a decade. So Doug Marquis, our head of engineering and labs and our product leader, would you join me on stage? They just naturally had a couple of chairs for us, so we're going to use them. Doug, a lot has been said, and I was supposed to pick this up on my way. You can tell this was not staged really well. I'm a sales guy. You know, we've been talking a lot about what we're going to be doing, but to kind of give some credibility about, even as I go back to Porsche, we know Porsche and the designers and who's behind that. But you were the architect brought in to help us on that journey. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you know, from early on when I was in technology, right? You're a car guy, I'm a tech guy, right? And so early on in the days when I was writing code, it was all about how to write good code that really met, you know, the needs of the user. And I kind of graduated into doing that more with teams and how do you make teams be highly functional and be really good at what they do. And now we're into how do we build organizations that are really world-class product development organizations. So when I talked to Jason about a year ago, that was something he wanted to do for the company. I felt it was a great spot for me to join the company and really help us get to that level. And so it's been a blast. I've loved every minute of it so far, and we're really doing well. We've got some great technical problems here as well, which I love to solve. So it's about building that organization, solving hard technical problems. You think about the predictive analytics work that we do, and I've got some background in that. Worked with the Homeland Security for a while, helping computers understand the English language and doing data mining on the internet, and a lot of really fun stuff, hard technical challenges. So that, along with predictive analytics to do online advertising, it's a really great fit for me here at SAVO, and it's been great so far in the last year.
I was just curious whose heads popped when they saw Homeland Security and went, uh-oh. You know what's interesting is I know you're a football player, history, and you didn't want me to bring this up. Where'd you play?
Well, I played at Iowa State University.
Yeah, there you go. And but he's a linebacker, so it's fun when we talk about Scrum and you get a linebacker in the middle of that in an agile approach. He's probably one of the most mild linebackers I've ever met in my life, but I'm sure on the football field he's pretty passionate. I've seen what the teams are doing. I'd like you to take through, we've talked about fast code, we've talked about iterating. In the point of view where I sit, explain what agile means from a practical point of view. It's nice in theory, we're talking about agile selling and all that, but just knock it down to what does that practically mean for our audience today? Why should we care?
Yeah, and it means several things, right? In terms of what we want people to think about on a day-to-day basis, it's how do we reduce the time from the time we come up with an idea to the time that we validate that that's a good idea and has been implemented very well. How do we shrink that down? So in a traditional waterfall model, there might be months, quarters, or even years between an idea and that idea coming to market, and even at the time it comes to market, you may not have the validation that you need. So again, as it's mentioned before, we take that validation period from idea to validation down to days and even weeks. So very much in that line of just reducing things, making things happen really fast, and then continuing to iterate on that. Again, so if we do need to correct, it's a very short correction.
That makes sense. We're going to kind of get into this a little bit, and we're going to get to see a demo. Much like Porsche couldn't lose the fabric of who they'd always been in the 911, what can we expect to still see within the fabric of a SAVO rollout and Aero and other parts of that platform that we can never afford to lose because it's very important to us?
Yeah, so a lot of what's underneath Aero is still the underlying infrastructure that's underneath Sales Content Pro and our other platforms today. So when you think about security, you think about enterprise scalability, you think about all the things that are important to our global 1,000 Fortune 100 companies that are out there. Those types of things are still there today. Scalability, security, we mentioned earlier that we have our C-Star compliance, which helps us go into Europe later this year. The speed at which we develop now actually allows us to do more frequent security, penetration testing, things like that keep us where we need to be. We have a customer, one of our largest customers, who's bringing on well over 100,000 users in the next handful of weeks. And we feel very good about that, given the process we go through to make sure that we're continuing to stay ahead of things. One other example on that front, our video transcoding engine is probably, given video is really prolific today, our video transcoding engine is probably about 20x the capacity it was even 2 or 3 months ago. So we continue to evolve our technology to meet the needs of the
So we
customer.
can practically handle the load. We can deal with the things of a capacity from the Dells of the world to even the smaller players within our portfolio to make sure that they get full scale.
Absolutely.
So what's behind that smarter product? What's in there? What should we expect to see?
Yeah, well, I think about the product in 2 different ways. One is the technology architecture, which is the cool thing that I like to think about. And then secondly, it's the user experience associated with it. When I think about the technology architecture, the core of what's there is really how do we quickly integrate with data? Because that seamless integration of data and the seamless ability to get data and connect with that stuff is really important to a lot of the things we do as we go forward. Secondly, that architecture actually supports all the fast iteration and the fast development that we do as well. So that architecture has a lot of automation in it. We've made a significant investment in that this year to allow us to do that. And then thirdly, I think about from an architecture perspective, the data that we're able to gather and use, and not only use from a traditional reporting and analytics perspective, like you would in a traditional BI world or a traditional data world. How do we put that data in a format where the computers can actually understand it and use it and make recommendations and predict things that need to be out there as well. So that, along with kind of the user experience that's associated with things, user experience, again, we think about the things that are up here today regarding personalized, we've talked about connected and prescriptive. Those are the things that really make up what the underlying architecture is supporting.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the point where anybody can make the front end look good, but what you want to look at is what's behind all of that. What's the engine that runs that for sustainability over time? Because just because it looks good doesn't mean it'll perform well once it hits the track. And so out here today, we have admins, we have executives, there's a variety of roles. We have customers that are the sellers, like myself, that hit the field on a daily basis to hit the numbers. There's people that support that selling motion. Break down the audiences for us. What can they expect to see? What makes sense for them, and what can they take back in a day and a half if they go back and say, not only is this cool, but this is practical?
Yeah, it's really interesting when we see the different user groups come towards this. From the seller perspective, it's easiest to probably show that in the demo, and we're going to show the demo here in just a few minutes on that front. But at the core of what we tried to do there was really take and present information and present capabilities to sellers in the way that they're used to experiencing them today. So we think about that consumer-driven website, for example, and it's about that while still supporting their business enterprise workflow. So that workflow being, they're preparing for an interaction, they're having an interaction, they're following up on that interaction. Usually they are in some part of that workflow many, many times a day, and we want to be able to support that, but more in a consumer-driven workflow. When you think about the administrators, certainly they've done a lot of customization and configuration and work to the system today. So we thought a lot about how do we best leverage that to what we do today with the capabilities. So when we built this and the capabilities you'll see in the demo or at the Genius Bar later, those capabilities really come from and leverage all that work that was done, but they don't increase the amount of work we do. So it's kind of magically extending the work that was done to create and present data in ways that the seller was really interested in when we got that feedback and presenting it in that way. So there's a lot there. There's some additional capabilities where we've automated some things in the sense of new versions of data, new versions of content get uploaded, and so we automatically update kits or we automatically update somebody's favorites. So again, when new things come out, we're communicating that. It's automatically showing up in front of the seller, and there's not a lot of work to do that.
It's taking the heavy burden off of the admin. Any of you that are admins out there, that should be a very happy thing that you hear. There was one other thing that I think is important. Even back in my days at Citrix, what was interesting is we were seeing the professional world and the personal world begin to merge together. That life ought to be able to be consumed the way we want to consume it. And so this idea that 9 to 5 shouldn't look that different from 5 to 9. And the reality is we were doing student body left with many of the applications that we did historically. That idea of now saying, we live in one world where the ability to consume content with feed or channel, or that ability to digest it when I want it, is going to be at the center for both our sellers and our admins to be able to disseminate, right?
Absolutely. And I think the third piece you mentioned, by the way, was from the executive, from the internal executive, what types of things do they see? And I really think about that in 2 ways. Again, it's about the data we gather on one hand, right? So the data we gather for the analytics and for the reporting that needs to happen, and how do you get visibility into what's working within the sales enablement ecosystem as a whole. The second piece to think about there is this is a platform that should integrate with the entire sales enablement ecosystem. So you've got other tools out there, CRMs, Outlook, email, calendar integration, social selling, all kinds of different things that are out there. And really from that executive level, one question to ask of your sales enablement vendor is how do you integrate with this ecosystem and create that single pane of glass for a seamless user experience as these new sellers who are coming online want to see it?
Yeah, I think from an executive point of view, what I would maybe suggest to all of us is what's important is optics, insight, and action. Your executives just want the right optics. They don't need a dozen of them. They want to know what optics should they be looking at to where they got the levers that are creating impact, and what insight should they glean that your engine should be able to give to them intuitively on that gearbox and that heads-up display. What is there that they need to look at that gives them real-time information about their field and how they're going to execute and predict success before it ever happens? And then finally, what action should they take to now course correct accordingly? But what I want to do now, let's get into Aero. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of that and what we can expect. And you have a helper.
I do.
Who's this?
Stacy Black. She's been instrumental in really a lot of the forward-thinking things we do around usability testing and integrating in lots of the seller's feedback in this process. She's brought a lot of great things into really, people talk about Agile. We push that probably to an extreme in terms of what we do, and some of those great ideas and pushing us to be thinking really hard about how we do stuff on a day-to-day basis came from Stacy.
Hi.
Hey, Stacy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're going to show us what we're actually going to get?
Yeah, it's on screen right now.
So this, just to preface this, the code that you're seeing here, the things that you're seeing is all live code. This is what will be released as we go into November 11th. We continue to iterate and we continue to get user feedback. So what you see here may change slightly, but
some of this is actually working live in some of our beta customers, right?
Absolutely. So as we talked about fast iteration, one of the things I didn't mention earlier, we started putting this Aero platform in front of customers and in front of users back in April. So this has gone through a number of different iteration and user feedback sessions. We do that with our mobile platform today, so a lot of folks have been involved with mobile. We're going to show a little bit of a demo around mobile. Did I lose my head here? So that's what this is. So again, you'll see this at the Genius Bar. If you go outside, you can set up an appointment to have this turned on in your own tenant at the Genius Bar today as well. So just at a high-level view, this looks very familiar to things you've seen in those sites that Jason mentioned earlier. You think about YouTube or TED Talks or different things. You see the content carousels, as we call them, across the top, and recommended kits at the very top of what you see here. So kits, which is a way to package information for those of you who may not be familiar with it, but kits was the most used capability on our mobile device. So we've taken that mobile device capability and we've brought it to the web. So its ability to package information and prescribe that out to certain user groups. As I mentioned before, as content is uploaded or new content comes in, the kits automatically get updated as well. So you'll see a lot of that, the carousels that you see, if we can jump back to that homepage, you kind of run down the page, and there were some really specific things that we heard from sellers which led us to populate certain sections of this page. The top search is one that's fairly interesting in the sense that when sellers saw the top search terms, and these are search terms across your entire company, what they said is it's really interesting because it gives them a perspective of what their customers are asking about. So that's a different perspective than my business wants me to know about this. This is my customer wants to know about these types of things. And so we ended up including that in here just through some usability sessions because, again, it provides people a lot of context, whether you're a seller or an admin, about what's happening out in the field. You'll see videos on here. Video is really important in the sense that video is now overtaken email as the number one communication mechanism or the number one information session that's out there. And you can see that you can play the videos from inline. You see nice big previews here, things of that nature. One of the other things I think that was important here to slow down on some of this, the most recently used documents and the ability to find information they've used before was a recurring theme that we heard from salespeople. So you'll see a number of different things here. One is the favorites. So any place in the system today you can pin something, and that saves it to your favorites. Again, that paradigm is probably pretty familiar to people. But the ability to come back in later and find that favorite information, or the frequently used documents, and the ability to come back in and see the documents you've used or searched for before.
Stacy, you've lived this on a day-to-day. Sometimes when we sit in the executive offices and have our meetings, we go out and have these great meetings. It's great, but from a practical day-to-day, what are you most excited about that you're seeing evolve right in front of our eyes?
I'm actually really excited about this section that's kind of like trending content. We're basically bubbling up the content that your users click on or consume the most, and I think that is an attestament to Doug's example of this is what your users are using, and this is what's most valuable to them. So this is my favorite thing about what's on the page right now.
You know what's funny is I've got a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I don't think they'll ever know a day when YouTube wasn't a part of their daily existence. And they watch videos from all over the place dealing with sports, or even, I don't know if in your household Nerf guns have become the preeminent thing again, but I think my kids have an arsenal, maybe a Texas thing, but they have like 50 Nerf guns now, and there's Nerf darts everywhere, but they watch other kids, and they follow kids, and they see what's trending about what to do with their Nerf guns. And so I think our kids and the millennials that we're hiring are growing up in a world where consuming that content like this is normal. It's not unique. It's just the way it's always been for them. Anything else new and novel in here we ought to highlight?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Again, one of the things you'll see on the page are these bigger previews than what we've had in the application before. It was, again, one of the more interesting conversations we had with salespeople and administrators, where salespeople wanted that bigger, lush preview where they could actually see a little bit more about the content itself. They could page through the content without drilling down deeper into the website. Administrators who have a little bit, just nuance of a little bit different use case, but they wanted to see smaller previews and more content on the page for the ability to manage things in a little bit better way. In this case, we erred on the side of the sales folks. I think we need to kind of take those on a case-by-case basis in terms of what to do, but for the tool we were trying to build, we felt like that was the right answer for this particular situation. I think
Let me interject real quick, because Jason highlighted something I want to bring us back to is based on where you're at, what we often find in the customers I'm talking to, a pivot completely to total personalization may not be what they're ready for. How do we make sure the permissions stay in control of the admin so that we don't lose sight and just let everything become, lacking compliance or even some governance that, perhaps an individual may just go off in the wrong direction?
Right. So today, again, underneath this, the governance, the compliance, the security mechanisms are still there. So you can think about things like the internal only flag. That still holds whether you're in SAVO or whether you're in our traditional SCP product. Again, the security, the user group permissioning, you only see what you're supposed to see whether you're in either one of the products today. You still see some things in here when you think about favorites and the ability to prescribe information in kits. That's one example of how you can do that. Some people who were part of our beta program saw a number of different capabilities that you don't see here today. So we looked at, as Jason mentioned earlier, the feed and whether the feed was the right way to prescribe information. We've looked at banner ads, for example, that might show up at the top, or do we need a set of information or a set of screen real estate specific for the admin or for somebody in the operations area to use to communicate information in a highlighted way, right? So again, still sticking with that paradigm of seeing information in a way that they're used to. Again, really designed for the purpose of having people not have to go through a learning curve, not have to go through a lot of training. And so that's a lot of what we see here. I think the remaining point on this particular demo, as we say, is the related assets here. And again, this is where our predictive analytics come into play. So we have a data science team that looked at all kinds of information. They looked at action data, so that's views and downloads. They looked at search terminology or terminology that's in particular documents that might match things up. They looked at all kinds of information to try to figure out what the best algorithm was to make a proper recommendation. And they put different variations of that algorithm in front of users, ultimately landed on an algorithm that from the user's perspective, made the most sense from a recommendation perspective. This is really our phase one at predictive analytics and recommendation, and so I expect that we will continue to invest in here. I expect we'll continue to find better ways to do recommendations, right? So version one in the theme of continuing to evolve, we'll see our predictive analytics continue to evolve and get smarter over time and be used in different places in different ways as well.
It's ultimately about data. I mean, machine-based learning is really about the more data you have, the more accurate it can become, and the more it can learn. If it doesn't get used, the prescription leading to prediction, machine-based learning at its finest needs multiple points of data. And so the more we get that, the better it gets.
Yeah, on one hand, we're in a great situation, right, because of the work John Aiello did and the fact that we've been gathering data for 12 to 15 years now across such a broad set of enterprise customers. We have more data to use than probably anybody out there in the sales enablement space. However, newer, fresher is better, and so the more information we get, the more data we can use to help inform the algorithms and to help make the right recommendations.
And we've been talking a good bit about showing this prescription and prediction, but the ultimate word we get to is connected and connections. So what's our first foray into connections, if you will, and a connected, kind of an experience?
Sure. So we're going to jump over to our iOS application, and this is a product that's in development today. It's scheduled to be released by the end of this year in 2016. What you're seeing here is a bit of a demo on it, but what you'll see here is the ability to go into a calendar on your mobile device, understand the meeting that somebody might be having, understanding the customer that it's with, who the contacts are, and then be able to associate assets with that meeting invitation so that those assets are readily available whether you're preparing for the meeting, whether you're in the meeting actually executing. A phase 2 will come along with this where we'll integrate more with the CRM data. So that's the ability, once you understand there's a meeting and who the customer is, identifying through predictive analytics, understanding what opportunity that might be associated with. From there, you can understand the product set that they might be selling. You can understand more about who you're talking to. Is it the CTO or the CFO or the CMO? So all of this connected information allows us to do a better job of predictive, prescriptive analytics and again, just help the users prepare for and execute in that point of contact when they're in the sales opportunity.
You know, I think it's almost an understatement, but Jason said a lot has changed in 1 year. We've come a long way, baby, but we're not done yet. We have a long way to go, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that what you're going to be able to see if you go down to the Genius Bar, down there on the second floor, is an ability to kind of touch, feel, see where we're going. But if you'd like to schedule a time that's post our event where we can do a more personalized walkthrough in your own tenant about what this stuff looks like, we'd like to be able to say, away from here, let's get on the phone together, show you what it looks like in your world. What is that to be desired state? Because to me, you seeing it for where you live and practicality and what the impacts and implications are is the most powerful thing. Anything to add as you guys are closing off? Any final thoughts on this?
No, I mean, again, the Aero platform is really interconnected, as we talked about, with our traditional Sales Content Pro platform. It's a single login. You can navigate back and forth there. They really are kind of the marriage of two very powerful products together to create a good experience for the salesperson. We've seen an adoption level that's moved up, an engagement level with our salespeople. We're excited for everyone to try it out, and we look forward to the feedback to continue to move forward with it.
Doug, Stacy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.